So if you have a Ferrari and you drive in on the highway and you get caught for speeding, do you perceive your speeding ticket as a oh, sorry, I shouldn't have been speeding, or is it, or that's just the cost of owning a Ferrari?
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to 6040, the only podcast that deep dives Asia's biggest tech and business headlines with the leaders actually driving the change. We are actually joined today by our guest host, none other than Walter de Oude, who is subbing in for Peter today. Hey, Walter, welcome.
Hey, Maria, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me to join the call today. Looking forward to it.
Me too. And of course, we also have Prashanth and Aleksey as well. So really excited because we're deep diving into some of the hottest topics from the last month or so. It's been a really busy January, I feel like, across Asia. So the topics we're covering today is the latest Airwallex AML case coming out of Australia, South Korea's AI Basic Act. We want to get a little bit into some of the job displacement with recruitment, and we'll end up on a few of the headlines and what's happening in markets. All right, let's jump in. So Airwallex AML. This is great because I think all of y'all are a bench of fintech experts and you understand this industry way better than me. But I'll try to give some of the basic background in terms of what's happening. So on January 22nd, the Australia Transaction Reports and Analysis Center, otherwise known as AUSTRAC, which is basically the financial regulator in Australia where Airwallex is headquartered, ordered the appointment of an external auditor to assess whether or not Airwallex is meeting its anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing obligations, so AML CTF. And they specifically said that they suspected serious noncompliance with the AML CTF Act by Airwallex for over the last 2 years, so January 2024 to 2026. Some of the key weaknesses was that they didn't have a transaction monitoring program that wasn't fully attuned to the global cross-border nature of their payments, insufficient understanding and definition of its customers, so KYC, and then concerns about how quickly and how well Airwallex identifies and reports suspicious matters, including any sorts of governance oversights and the reporting. So I think my first question for somebody who's not deep in this industry is, how big of a deal is it to get this kind of notification sent out by one of the financial regulators, especially in your headquarter country? Walter, you want to take a stab at this as the founder yourself?
Sure. Look, I think the starting point here is when you are regulated by a regulator, the bar is set way, 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 way high. The compliance with that is not an option or I think we'll try our best. It's mandatory, right? I think obviously if you're selling cars and you're not regulated, you're a little bit less front and center, or mind front and center on some of these AML issues. But AML has been an issue for years and years, and every regulated entity has a massive, massive obligation not to have any goals scored against them. And entities have to demonstrate consistently their capability in making sure that they adhere to the guidelines and can show that they have a goalkeeper and systems and processes and governance and culture in place to make sure these things don't happen. Now, that said, there's every now and then things do happen and you don't catch everything. And I'm not suggesting that is what happened in Airwallex's case, but every now and then it is a hard thing to do, and people have to have these controls in place. So, I mean, the fact that there is government continuous pressure and investigation on this suggests more to me the resilience of regulators to make sure that the industries that are under their control are tight ships, and sometimes these audits are yes, they do sometimes uncover gaps, but they also send a very, very strong message to the entire industry around the expectation of the regulator for ships to be sailed in accordance with the expectations laid out for them by the regulators. That's the starting point for me on this one.
Okay, Prashanth, you're nodding along.
Yeah. I want to just add a little bit more color to the picture. So first of all, let's look at the entity structure of Airwallex, right? So Airwallex was founded in Australia, but then subsequently moved their headquarters to Singapore, and I think it's dual headquarters with the US. And they also have another regulated entity in the UK. So this is a multi-jurisdictional, multi-regulator kind of setup as a company. And that's quite critical because they're in the business of moving money, right? So you can't just run foul in one jurisdiction and not have other regulators in other jurisdictions also start to kind of start the sniff test. The second thing is this has also been going on for many years, right? And so 2024 was the first initial findings, and in 2025, Airwallex commissioned their own independent auditor to go through the books and go through their systems, go through their processes, and come back with a clean sheet. So clearly, AUSTRAC found that to be not sufficient or not enough. The fact that AUSTRAC is pressing on means there is something that is of some grave concern. And the fact that they're pressing on means it won't be lost on the MAS or other regulators around the world as well. So they will also take notice of what is it that AUSTRAC is so concerned about, because it's not like this is only affecting one part of the business, it probably affects other parts as well. So everyone wants to save face, everyone wants to step up. But at the same time, look, I have other friends of mine who do run similar businesses. It's not uncommon to get pulled up for some of these things. It's how you respond that determines like how successful you will be. I think it's all about how the senior leadership and the board engages, takes it very seriously, and demonstrates that they've gotten the message, and not try to brush this under the rug. I think that will determine how they will sail through this. That's going to be the key.
It's a fun little aspect of this industry. They do payments in 70 countries. They're licensed in 6 or something like that. And they have offices in 18 or 15, something like that. There's an argument to be made that in about 50 countries plus, they're completely unlicensed as a money mover. Now, that's actually a fact of all the payments companies.
Yeah.
That's not a unique thing.
Yeah.
It's a well-known fact in finance is that you comply most stringently with the laws and regulations of the places where you have people, you have licenses, and you kind of are a little bit more lax in the places where you're not licensed, you don't have people, and therefore the risk to you is quite a bit less. And what seems to be happening is, particularly on this topic, AML, terrorism financing, KYC, regulators are starting to think extraterritorially and saying, well, I don't care that this is a Nigeria, Malaysia issue. You have an office in Australia, or you have an office in the US, and one of these people moved my currency through your system. And now this is an Australia or US issue.
Right.
It happens in wealth management and savings as well. Walter's a perfect example. He's got an entity in every country he's in. It's a pain in the ass, forgive my language, to get one, right, Walter?
Sure.
But you have to do it. That's not the case for payments. And that's what makes this industry prone to these things. So I agree completely with Prashanth. They either react to it with yep, we get the message, we're going to fix it up, and it's going to cost us more money, and our margins will go down temporarily. And that's the price of being in this industry, or the hits will keep coming.
Yeah. I think it's extending even further now, not just to the AML, and it's now also to things like scam risk and the systems and controls that are in place to monitor transactions, to not only pick up fraudulent or AML, CFT issues, but also all things that expose financial misappropriation of funds or misuse thereof. And the expectation that I've seen in every market where chocolate is regulated is a really, really, really strong focus on reporting, which means to be able to demonstrate that your systems are acting at every single payment to do its checks and automations and things to catch things that are there. And even if you catch things that say, this guy shouldn't be seeing this money, and you reject the transaction, you still are obligated under most regulations to report that. To collect the data around these activities is not just I've got a policy in place and my senior management has a responsibility. That's rubbish. You actually you can't do this manually. You have to do it fully automated, and you have to be able to catch these things and pass them in. But AML is just goes without saying. You just can't make those mistakes and get away with it.
So India used to have this very kind of, I'd say, no teeth type of reporting mandate where you had to report, but if you didn't report, it wasn't that big a deal. So people were very sloppy. So in fact, more than fixing the problems and the occurrence of the problems, they fixed the reporting first. They said if you don't report within 3 hours and then 8 hours and within 24 hours, the penalties would just stack up, right? So what happened is people would actually report more out of fear of the penalty, and then actually spend more time then fixing the problems. I think what happens is when you have no teeth to these problems, or when these investigations happen, people just don't take it as seriously. But I think the reporting has to be solved, and then go work backwards to fixing the systems as well.
But speaking of teeth there, I mean, if you look at the AUSTRAC penalty that they imposed on Revolut last year for AML breaches, AML, they charged, the fine for Revolut was $123,000 for a company that's worth 70, 80, hundreds and billions and billions and billions. Where's the teeth in that, in my view, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you have a Ferrari and you drive in on the highway and you get caught for speeding, do you perceive your speeding ticket as a oh, sorry, I shouldn't have been speeding, or is it, or that's just the cost of owning a Ferrari, right? It's just an added thing. And this is where it comes down to culture in organizations, is to say, well, actually, is there a cultural understanding of the necessity to drive the car at the correct speed or catch the AML up front, where this is front and center to how you, not just how you operate and govern at a management level, but how you build systems, because you can't do this stuff without building the right systems from the ground up in place. The fines, when there are breaches, should be commensurate with the size of the organization.
Okay, Walter, I think you raised a good point. From Airwallex's perspective, Prashanth, to your point, this started 2 years ago. How rare is it for the original notice to come out, but then how rare is it that they weren't able to fix it in the 2 years that they were given, and then they're basically getting another slap on the wrist?
Look, these things do happen, right? As you grow, you're in the mindset of growth, and sometimes kind of scaling all your systems, all your people, all your processes is not top of mind. You're thinking, let me get the growth, and then I'm gonna get to this. Right? And then fundraisers come through. Squeaky wheels get oiled. And you miss some of these things. Happens all the time. Now you can't have that happen multiple times. You can't have that continue to get bigger and more problematic. And especially you can't have that continue to happen when it's called out, right? So if it was called out in 2024, and every entrepreneur is different, every founder is different, my approach would be to lean in, right? My approach would be, let me put this out quickly. Let me lean in and fix it. Let me actually fix it, and not just, I watched this whole thing. I'm not sure that was done, at least not done to a satisfactory level. So I still don't think it's too late. I still think they can get out of this by just leaning in. But I think it's important that they just take it seriously and get it sorted. And I think that would be the approach that would be wise.
Okay, so this is basically the second time with AUSTRAC. So is it like a 3 strikes and you're out? Like on the third strike, it's like, okay, you're not taking it seriously.
I don't think that's how regulators work. I don't think it matters if it's your second time or your fourth time. It's bad every time.
Yeah. And you carry that with you. There's reputational risk here.
Yeah,
I think the biggest issue is, one Prashanth mentioned, the other regulators are going to be saying, hey, we haven't looked at this. Should we now? That's the first thing. But the second thing is, Airwallex has grown a lot through the corporate side, right? It's supporting businesses and moving money around. They've pitched us a couple of times, and we have a very hard rule. Don't do business with people under investigation. We're not the only ones. I know they're planning an IPO. They just did a fundraise. There will be people saying, you know what, we were starting to set up with Airwallex. We're going to wait and see how this works out. And that is that, you asked the question about, investor point of view. That's the investor point of view. In my world, Robinhood was a perfect example. When all of the GameStop, Bed Bath & Beyond stuff happened in the US, they nearly collapsed. Not because they were a bad company, but because it had never happened to them before. They were 5, 6 years in, whereas companies like Fidelity, Charles Schwab, JP Morgan, this was table stakes that this is how the market works, and you need to have a lot more collateral when things go crazy. So they needed a massive funding boost between Saturday and Sunday to get to Monday. Otherwise, Robinhood would not have existed. But they did, and they've now put in place procedures to make sure that doesn't happen to them again. The same will probably happen here, but this is what happens to new companies when they're learning how their industry works at scale. And for now, there will be people who don't do business with them until they prove that they've sorted it out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true from exactly for all startups that or early stage companies that are growing very rapidly. Capital is always an issue, and investor management is a thing, right? And the example of Robinhood is a great one, an existential issue which was overcome, and then Robinhood is now flying, right? I mean, chocolate had an issue last year, as you remember, where we had a massive amount of withdrawals. It was a real business issue which we managed successfully. But if you recall, that issue happened in March last year. We raised new money, mainly for our Hong Kong and international expansion in the July, which showed that some investors actually can see through the execution of companies to say, well, actually, these guys know what they're doing, and we're willing to keep putting money behind it and keep growing. And that was a Robinhood case, and hopefully the Airwallex case, that these companies can work their way through all of the challenges that are put in front of them and come out awesome. That's the hope for all early stage companies.
But Walter, you leaned in, right? You leaned in right off the bat, like within day one. You leaned in with your audience on LinkedIn, with your investors, with your regulator. You owned it. You said misstep, miscalculation, everything is safe. We're coming back. That's the most important thing. It's not what happens; it's how you respond to it that matters most in these cases. I guess that's the case in point.
Prashanth and Walter, as the fintech founders, what would y'all have done differently?
I mean, I think the ruthless transparency of this stuff, especially with the regulator, has to go without saying. If there are repeat breaches, then the evidence of learnings from those things need to be, inculcated through organizations. You just can't take the stuff lightly. You really have to. I mean, Prashant used the word lean in and really get your hand on top of the stuff, just to make sure that you're not just dealing with it, you're smothering it with dealership. If you really have to
way on top of this, and you will see it and know it and feel it.
You put 1,000% into squashing these things when they become issues, because they can become existential, as Aleksey is alluding to.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would manage all my regulators, right? Because I know the MAS is thinking this, I know the US is thinking this, I know the UK regulator is thinking this now, because no one wants to get caught asleep at the wheel, right? So they're gonna be like, hey, how did the Aussies catch it and we didn't see anything here? Like, how can you be so sure? So I would manage across all of it, and I'm sure Jack and the team are doing just that, right? Like, we just don't know from the outside, but they're probably just doing that. I would also signal very effectively to investors, customers, and all stakeholders that we're taking this seriously, and this happens, and we're on it.
Two more questions on this. So one are, obviously the Australian regulator is the first one to call it out. Do regulators share information? Would like MAS? Okay, so then MAS and the US would be coming to AUSTRAC and being like, what's going on? And then, so that's probably one of the bigger risks for Airwallex at this current point in time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there is a big investigation in process. I don't think it would be. I mean, I would be surprised if another regulator just steps out and say we want to do an audit as well. I think it'll run its course for a little bit and then see. I think if things are uncovered that have knock-on effects, then I think other regulators might get involved. But generally, regulators got enough stuff to do rather than do the work of another regulator. Yeah.
Okay, so they're paying attention, but until something has been proven, they're basically just paying attention and keeping their eye on it versus like jumping straight in.
I'm sure a phone call was made from one of the other regulators to this channel to say, hey, just what did you guys find? Keep us posted, please. We needed to do an entity change in one of our countries. And we were point blank asked by that regulator, who is your officer in Hong Kong? we're going to give him a call just to check in and make sure you guys are doing everything right in Hong Kong. They did, and it was all fine, and we all moved on. But for sure they talk, and they have relationships, and they have inter-regulatory conferences where they share, they get to know each other, and they cooperate on improving the world.
And then, Prashanth, the last thing is you obviously mentioned that, yes, you're right. They did move their headquarters to Singapore, and they've dual headquartered in the US because of potentially a rumored and upcoming IPO. How critical is this to their IPO? Do they need to get it resolved in time? Could this derail it, delay it?
Yeah, look, I think it's also focus, right? If they take this seriously, a lot of management time and focus will go in getting this sorted and putting enough mileage between this whatever moment in time and the next fundraise, right? I think they would want to do that, and they would want to put some mileage there. I don't think they would go into an IPO window with this hanging for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So they'll want to put this behind them, and they'll again similar to chocolate, they'll want to demonstrate that they've emerged stronger, more resilient, more capable, and more durable as a company. And I think they'll take their time to do that. And if they just raise money, so it's not like they're in a rush. So that's what I would do. I'm sure that's what they're thinking. So.
Okay, I'm just going to ask each one of y'all, do you think that this is a case of where there's smoke, there's fire? Because I mean, so far it's all been about the regulatory, what the policies and processes, the systems and controls. But do we think that there's something actually happening there? Walter, you first.
I have no insight at all into Airwallex's practices. All I know is that good governance calls for this stuff to be evidenced and reported. If there are concerns from a regulatory perspective, it's up to the companies to do the work that's necessary to do to demonstrate that they're running tight ships. Generally, if a regulator is asking some questions around audits, they don't do that it's not like a random testing. I mean, they must have some reason to do so. Yeah, I guess we'll see soon enough.
Aleksey?
Well, first, I'm glad Walter went first with that question.
Did a great job. Very diplomatic.
I'll be less diplomatic. Every company has these issues that's in this industry. The question is not whether or not there are some AML, CFTC problems. There are in every company. What you need to do, what the regulators want you to be doing, is trying to catch 99%. Because it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? When you stop one thing, the bad actors find another thing. So I don't know if Airwallex is trying hard enough or not. As Walter said, that's inside information. But if you're not trying, your issues will be uncovered. And everyone has issues. So that's the problem for them right now.
Okay. Prashanth?
I'll just add a little nuance, right? I think if you operate in countries where there are capital controls, it's very likely that someone is trying to test your systems to thread the needle, right? So you have to just be super, super duper careful. These are not very direct money movements either. These are networked money movements. It hops around a lot before it kind of makes it. So it's actually not as simple as we have a process and we kind of went through that process to determine it. I think you have to kind of build systems as complex and as intricate as what the fraudsters are building to kind of move their money.
All right, let's shift gears from a highly regulated industry to a less regulated industry, AI, obviously also new. So going to South Korea on January 22nd, a new law went into effect called the AI Basic Act. It's definitely the first of its kind in Asia, and I think besides the EU, the first of its kind in the world, to govern AI companies in terms of how their technology is used. So there were three things that really kind of stood out to me, which is one, this idea of a high impact AI. So they introduced a new formal category called high impact AI. So systems and AI programs that could materially affect human life or safety, fundamental rights, public order, or economic safety. And so if you're classified as high impact, then you have to go through all this additional work in terms of conducting risk assessments. Basically kind of owning up to the impacts of the technology the impact that your technology has. The second part is transparency and user notification. So basically, the operators must disclose when users are interacting with AI, and then basically try to like prevent any sort of deceptive or untruthful AI, generative AI. And the last one is just government oversight and, being forced to work with the South Korean government in case anything happens. What are your thoughts on the new law? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? We can also get into a little bit in terms of comparison as to what we're seeing it happen in Europe and the US. Aleksey, thoughts on this one?
So I'm the traditional finance guy, right? So of course I'm excited to see unregulated things become regulated. It's a bit like Australia's, child social media law. Like we all know this is common sense. We all know this is what we should be doing, and yet, for a variety of lobbying related reasons, the world's leading companies in this space, so the world's leading countries in this space, are taking their time. Even Europe's law, it doesn't really go into effect for 2 or 3 more years. Korea's really is the first because not only, they're basically saying the penalties don't start for a year, but you need to start complying now. Whereas Europe, I think, has like a 3-4 year on ramp. In the US, this law is impossible for the foreseeable future. Take a look at XAI and some of the child pornography images saga that's been happening. Like, have you noticed the US say anything? Not one thing. All the other countries are either starting investigations or banning or asking them to change. Everyone's taking a different approach. And the US is just going, what I don't see isn't happening. So kudos to Korea for doing it properly. If I had one complaint, the maximum fine is something like 20 million won, which is a joke. It's like 30,000 US. So if I'm an AI startup, or even a global AI company operating in Korea, I'm just going, okay, I'll just $30,000 a hit. Not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. To Walter's point earlier, the amount of money being raised here, you need to make it hurt. I think the European law says, for startups, it's up to 1% of revenue. For non-startups, it's up to 7% of revenue. That's material. I think they probably balanced. They got all, and to me, all the things they put into it in terms of the actual regulations all seem very sensible, but probably onerous to enforce, and for companies to comply with. So then they went, okay, we'll go a little bit easier on the penalties because we know this is going to take some time to get right.
I think for South Korea, the beautiful thing here is there's a focus on guardrails and ideology rather than fixed outputs or inputs. The evolution of AI in global markets is moving so fast. You cannot govern what it can and can't do because it's all aiming for this one big thing, which is we call the singularity, right? The point in time when it can do things that there's a lot of different definitions of that, but when it replaces us, so to speak. And so the question then is, how do we give, or from an ethical perspective, guardrails or guide rails such that organized markets can develop these tools in a way which is beneficial to mankind rather than commercial or whatever else these things could be. And the other piece is that in every market where I've seen regulation come into place, bad actors will always do something outside of that, right? I mean, if you can't access a certain software in a home country, you just use a VPN and use it in someone else's country. That's the way it works. But at least there is some ethical principles now put in place, which I think is really admirable.
I think I agree for most part. I think the one tweak I'd add is I want to remind us of a conversation we had. I think we said, well, what does a perfect picture for AI look like for us, right? One is we said it should democratize a little bit more of this access to intelligence and information. The second one is it should be deflationary, right? And we said this last year, so let me build on that. So I think this regulation, or this first, what I call starter pack of regulation, actually does both. One is it actually helps defines how people can actually access this AI and how funding from government agencies could be driven to help that access. So now you have a legal way for funding to find its way into consumers who need kind of support to access AI. And the second is this could be deflationary in the sense that if now with these guardrails, if we're able to build AI into society, into the economy and what we want, it could actually drive the price down versus kind of be in the hands of few and drive the price up for the others. So in that sense, I think nothing more to add than what Walter and Aleksey already said, but I think this is good for both the democratization and the deflationary pressures that AI should have ultimately, other than being beautiful and curious. And
yeah. I mean, I think what's nice is that it's not what you've seen in other parts, like the threat of getting like AI code reviewed, because that just seems insane and like obviously a recipe for disaster. And so I think it's quite elegant in that, they are really kind of regulating the outcome and the output, and then putting the onus, like a minor onus or responsibility onto the AI companies themselves. And then the penalties, I assume, will get larger as it goes. But then there's also the balance of like innovation and growth versus regulation and safety, right? And which I think is always the case as well. South Korea does have a thriving local AI startup scene. If you go back to, our bingo cards or everything, Peter and I both picked South Korea as like the next country to be huge in AI. So they don't want to slow down their own growth, and like, especially on their startup side, they want to be able to have as many South Korean AI startups compete at a global level as possible. And so there's like a balance between, too much regulation to the point where you're like choking off obviously a brand new and very fast changing industry versus something that could actually create material harm for the overall populace. I mean, I think it does do quite a good job doing that. I'm kind of surprised or impressed that South Korea just like went out and took the lead on this one. Like, I feel like they're not usually the first to kind of regulate these things, but I don't know, maybe they saw what happened with social media and they're just like, we don't want that to happen again. And yeah, I'm not sure what was driving
and
that
you also
impetus.
set yourself up as a legitimate hub for innovation, right?
Yeah.
I think as startups, if you're thinking about, hey, where should I base my setup, you're going to try and find some place where there's some semblance of kind of like a blueprint or some guardrails, and you're like, well, that works beautifully for me. At least I know what I'm doing is 100% within the lines, right? I actually think it's very, very smart of South Korea to kind of put their foot out there and say, look, again, we're leaning in, right? We're embracing it. We don't have all the perfect answers. We may not have the perfect lines in the right spots, but at least we have a semblance of one and others don't. And we're embracing the change. We want this. We want to kind of allow it to grow. And I think when they have lines, they can also pour capital.
Yeah. I mean, it's like building a fintech startup in Singapore, where it's obviously well regulated, versus Dubai,
Right.
where there's not that much regulation. You can do whatever you want, and to each their own, and people will self-select based off of the kind of market that an environment they want to be building in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. Any other thoughts in terms of the South Korea AI Act? We feel like it's generally good. I mean, I hope this becomes more of the global model for sure.
The fact that it exists shows a general encouragement from regulator to the industry to say, get on with it, stuff, guys. This stuff is coming. Let's make South Korea great by building responsible AI led initiatives.
I find it fascinating that it's the quote unquote smaller countries or less advanced countries that are leading the way on some of these things, right? I think it was in either Indonesia or Malaysia that full on banned XAI's AI. You have Korea putting out this law, again, coming back to Australia, social media law. Like, everyone else is just pretending that these companies will solve these problems themselves. And it's never going to happen until the governments get involved. The fact that it's starting is unquestionably a good thing. And hopefully, other people will iterate on Korea's law, probably improve on it, because this was the first one, right? So the other countries will look at it, adjust it, and then Korea will adjust it as well. And this is what we should be all rooting for.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the smaller countries reacting more quickly this time because they've seen this movie before, right? Like, I think when the social media networks came up and the tech giants came out of the US benefited tremendously from it. But then I think all these other countries around the world were just subject to what these social media platforms were deciding. And then obviously it's had massive harms in terms of like the younger generations and other things like that. And then everybody was just claiming Section 230 or whatever, like it's not my responsibility. And so they're just like, we're not going to fall for this trick again, right? Like just because the US can't be bothered or can't figure out its own shit to go regulate your industries doesn't mean we're going to be subject to the impacts of your poor decision making. I think it's a good thing that people are like, we're not getting tricked again.
I think there's another piece to this. Is like, a year ago when all this AI stuff, or more, when this stuff started, we all came up as organizations, we came up with specific use cases that we could apply AI to. As time has gone by, we're moving from specific use case AI solutions to an inculcated way of working, right? And one of my New Year's resolutions this year was I'm going to become an AI guru because I've got no choice. I have to absolutely embrace this stuff. If you look at the South Korea case around how these guardrails are to be adopted, when you take that in the context of how people are actually thinking about adoption, you put the two together. And it's not just about I need to not make sure that my customer service never puts out content which is false. I mean, that's just a tiny, tiny, tiny use case. But how do we build the overall infrastructure of this? They talk about data center usage, cost of that stuff, economies, differentiation between bigger companies and smaller companies. If you read it all, there's a ton of stuff in there. So all good. But when you roll it back as to actually how do we apply that to our own adoption, it's quite broad based on the difference between just solving a particular problem or generating an AI culture.
Yeah, totally agree. Let me know how that AI guru goes because I need some help on that front, to be honest. That was my New Year's resolution last year and I failed utterly.
I will do. It's going pretty well, actually. I'll show you later.
Okay, cool. All right. To our last big segment of the day, and it's a new one. Okay, this is Prashanth's idea. I'll give him the credit for it. The idea is that each week we will take a traditional business and kind of think about how AI can transform it. We're calling it, I don't know, either the AI rebuild or humans optional. For this first time, since it's a new segment, I think we'll lean into the humans optional part because I think Prashanth is very perturbed by some of the data and findings, stats coming out in terms of like unemployment and jobs cutting. So Prashanth, do you want to give a quick overview on what's got you hot and bothered?
So look, I have the fortune of having a lot of young nephews and nieces in different parts of the world who've just come into the workforce, right? They've just graduated their 4-year kind of top tier university college degrees, and and they're struggling to find jobs, right? And they're struggling to find jobs. And this is a debate I was having with Peter, who's not here today. And Peter always says, well, unemployment's at an all-time low or is flat, it's not actually changing. But I actually think this is very nuanced, right? So I think where I think there is significant impact is that this graduating class, and in fact the last couple of years of graduating class, there's actually a fundamental disconnect in terms of what expectations they graduated with, what skills they graduated with, and what economy that they had kind of planned towards, and where the economy is in terms of certainty and uncertainty. And I think this is impacting them significantly. I think if we pull the numbers, I do think there's a significant drop in the rate of employment post-graduation within the first 12 months or what have you for this cohort that's graduating. And in part, it has a lot to do with AI, right? So one thing that AI has done in combination with all the global uncertainty is actually have a shrinking effect on employment. Of course, there's a lot of layoffs happening around the world, but at the same time, the rehiring rate has kind of pretty much fallen off, right? So that's one impact. The second is, I think the skills that this young graduating class is coming out with is not perfectly matched with what these entry-level jobs need, right? When they went into these programs 4 years ago, I think they had a certain view of what the skills they would need to bring to their first job. But I think this last year of what Walter was describing as the AIification or application to operating system kind of transformation that's happened has fundamentally changed what employers are looking for in terms of their incoming graduates and what they want to hire for. The third is there's this expectation from this graduating class, like I said, that what they studied would be directly applied, but to work. But if you have not done what Walter is doing right now, which is take that, apply this very deep level of AI to it to become productive, then I think you're not employable or easily employable. And I don't think they've made that transition yet. And this is causing significant, I guess, what I think unemployment. And lastly, the old fogies like us on the call, we're not sitting idle either, right? So we have 20 years of experience and we've jumped in and we're tinkering and we're doing all the junior level jobs ourselves. We're kind of like trying to pull our own data. We're trying to create our own presentations. We're trying to vibe code our way into something. And that also is at least leaving us with a false sense of confidence that we can do it ourselves. So we're stalling hiring the juniors and we don't have the budget for it either. So all this is actually happening at the same time. So I wanted to say this is all like a compounding effect of what's happened with AI in the graduating class.
All right, let me give you the data. Sorry. On average, the unemployment rate for college fresh grads is around 3 to 4%. That the last time it was super high was 2012. It was around 4.2%. During COVID, obviously, it spiked again. I think it was above like 5 to 6%. And then I think the latest data from last March, I mean, I think we're waiting for this year, but the latest data from last March was 5.8%. So it actually has been significantly higher during, but you know, like I would also say I hear a lot on the ground in terms of like, is it AI? Is it like people don't know how to work with Gen Z, which to be fair, every generation says, they said this about millennials, you know, like it's always like the young people's fault. It's never the old people's fault. Yeah. So like I do think AI, yes, does have a large role to play here.
Man, the world is changing so fast. I mean, when we grew up, my parents said to me, you know, get a good degree, go to a good university, get a good degree, get a job, and then you'll be okay. But that didn't work out for me. I went to an average university. I was lucky enough to become an actuary, but then got a job, and then I realized that my source of life's pleasure was to give it all up and be a startup guy. If you look at how things are changing now, ask your computer to give you the knowledge. The knowledge is all there, right? The question is about the application of knowledge and about how to multiply yourself in the exploitation of that. So if you're looking at AI in the workforce, the issue is not about replacing people, right? It's that's not it. The issue is, how do I make one person a superhuman, right? How do I take one guy who is great and make him 10 times greater? And if you can build organizations full of superhumans, it's not a limiting factor. You can have, you know, productivity go through the roof by having more and more and more superhumans. You're just hiring people that are much, much more capable. And what demonstrates capability is their ability to leverage themselves or leverage the AI to deliver more. That's the new paradigm in my view. And I think hiring will go that way. The question is always, okay, well, not what do you know and what is your experience, but actually what can you do and what have you built and how can you demonstrate that you are more than just a university grad. If you're just a university grad with a Harvard degree, I'm sorry, that's just not enough anymore.
All right. We have 4 hiring managers on this call. Can you raise your hand if AI has changed the way that you hire at your company? 1, 2, 3. Aleksey, no, not so much for you yet.
Everything you guys have said, I've always looked for those characteristics, and I can't believe I'm about to say this. I think I'm more optimistic than Prashanth is on something for once. Yes, this is happening, right? The greater unemployment among kids. You know, I also have a niece that struggled to get a job until she eventually did. But this happened around the financial crisis in our industry, where the financial services massively stopped hiring, and all the people who. But show me a university that isn't already adjusting. They all are. So yes, there's going to be this transition period, and then we will all be fine. These things, you know, this is the cool thing about our species. We figured this shit out, and we all move forward. So there's going to be this difficult transition period. So I don't know. This is something that we have to work through, but I don't know if it's existential.
But to the original question, is AI going to, reduce the workforce? I don't think it will. I think we'll just
Yeah.
get more and more productive. It's
Yeah,
like,
we're growing
if
the
you
pie.
going from pens to computers, right? That was going to kill millions and millions of people. Now we're just going to go from computers to AI assistants. So we're just multiplying our productivity
Yeah.
tenfold, which means that the output of businesses will be tenfold, which is very, very, very positive for economies, for future outlook, for efficiencies, for reducing costs overall. The contributors to this new economy are those that are going to be most readily able to contribute or to become superhuman, to have the tools around them to be superhumans. And I think the universities will recognize that and produce superhumans. And so we're at the cusp of a new way of thinking, but the end outcome is going to be people that are smarter, more capable, with more tools, more ability to do cool stuff, both organically and within organizations. And I think that's all good.
Last one, let's wrap up. Alexi, can you share what's happening in markets? The big tech's getting pretty hammered for some of their capex spend, but then the Dow Jones is like reaching its highest ever. What's your view on this?
Those things that can't be replaced by AI are now valuable again.
Got it.
We talked about this at some point last year that you know, the premise behind the value of all these Mag 7 type stocks in portfolios was that they were very capex light and they just printed money because one line of code could be sold 5 million times. And that is incredibly profitable. But now all of a sudden, what they're telling us, oh no, no, but we need to have we need to have the infrastructure to be able to dominate the next world of tech, and therefore we're going to spend 150 billion of your money, the shareholders' money, this coming year to build tech that will be obsolete in 3 to 4 years. Meanwhile, we're going to need a lot of energy, and Exxon is sitting there going, I still have to dig that out of the ground. So yeah, the investors are starting to differentiate between capex that they believe will generate a lot of profit in the future versus capex that is capex for capex sake. Um, Investors are starting to look at those valuations and saying, so you're a 30 PE company, which makes a lot of sense when you are capex light and you have an ROE of X. Does it still make sense when you're capex heavy and have an ROE of 1/2 of X? So there is a rotation that is happening away from the expensive things that were assumed to grow at current margins 30-40% a year forever, and nothing does that, um, to things that are growing at smaller margins and and are priced to grow at 3-4%, but now might be growing at 5-6%. I think I've said it before, like markets traded on the marginal change of information. And that little bit of change, slightly worse expectations for the amazing, incredible future for the big companies versus marginally better information and expectations for the regular companies, which are now themselves starting to see the AI benefits um, flow through, means that a company that was forgotten at a PE of 10 could be re-rated to PE of 12, and that's an amazing return, versus a company that's loved at a PE of 40 could re-rate to a PE of 38, and that's not an amazing return. So the tricky part with all of this is figuring out when this was going to happen and whether or not this is a temporary thing or this is a new trend. I'm in the latter camp. I think that this is going to, this started with Facebook's capex earnings in their Q3 earnings. Right, Facebook fell 10%, but subsequently recovered, by the way, and actually went up on these earnings. And then Google and Amazon and Microsoft had their first, hey, what are you really doing with capex quarter? They'll probably recover a bit as well, but I think the market is now going to start to differentiate and look, where is there value? Where are there things that are safer, which is probably everything that's physical related? Um, and which companies are don't yet have the AI premium and profit expansion priced in, but could soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, there's obviously what the market's evaluating, and then also how the companies respond, right? Because Facebook, we felt like responded by going out and purchasing Manus, amongst other things, to kind of show the breadth of their portfolio or whatever. And so let's see if any of these companies really rein in their capex spending, or if they just keep going.
I suspect they will for another quarter or two.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks to everybody at home for listening. This is the 6040 podcast. You can drop us any nominations for feedback or speakers at 6040podcast@techinasia.com. And we will see y'all in a few weeks' time.